Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking the Arrow episode Training Day. And honestly, I gotta say, this episode was not bad, but certainly not a standout. Well, let's just kind of get through the more negative stuff first. The future storyline continues to be really boring and almost painfully predictable. Also, Felicity's voice hasn't changed the slightest bit in 20 years. Okay, I mean, I understand that's just a limitation and sort of tweaking that would be a nice touch, but something that's not really required. But, I mean, people's voices do change over time, even once they're adults. I mean, it's usually very slight, but it is noticeable. At least I think so. Okay, so getting back to dealing with the stuff in the present day. Okay, well, this is one of those episodes where it's like there's a situation, there's an idea in this story that in some way needs to be resolved before the story can move forward. And that's, of course, just a big part of fiction and storytelling, especially serial storytelling. Like, okay, so now the vigilantes have to work with the cops. Well, big surprise, that's obviously not going to go completely smoothly from the beginning. That's an issue you do need to address. And I'm glad the show doesn't ignore that. I mean, even if it is something that's extremely obvious. But the way they handle it is just not done well. Now, granted, by the end of the episode, they have a reasonable solution. The vigilantes are going to kind of more or less be, as Renee puts it, the black ops squad of the cops. They're going to have some limitations, and I like how they're just very vague on exactly how evidence and things like that are going to work for these guys. But okay, that's again a little bit of a necessary hand wave. But just the conflict going up to this. I mean, I do like that they do kind of address it like, look, we're under a lot of pressure. We need to make this work from the get-go. So play things by the book. Okay, this explains why this wasn't the situation from the start. Um, and the thing that got me at the beginning of this was when the bust goes bad. Well, first of all, I mean, yes, the police are not perfect, but the idea that they wouldn't like notice obvious blind spots and would be so bad about planning contingencies for if the bad guys make a break for it or something like that, I mean, that's that's pretty laughable, but not entirely unbelievable in all fairness. And just to give you an example, some years back, there was a bank in my hometown that got robbed. The bad guys got away. The bank was down the street from police headquarters. Yeah, these guys successfully robbed a bank within spitting distance of police headquarters and got away. But again, that's my hometown cops seriously dropping the ball, not an indictment of every cop in the entire country or so I just can't help but feel just disgust whenever I think about that. There's a reason I don't go back to my hometown very much anymore. That being very low down on the list of reasons why I don't go back. So many of the people there being utter dumbasses being the number one. But anyway, the other now to be fair though, the cops are not blameless in this. When Oliver and them go and try to do things the vigilante way, well, oh yeah, I'm going to threaten to dunk this guy's face in acid, and his admission of guilt is totally going to be admissible in court. Now, granted, Arrow has played really, really loose with what would actually be legal in the real world. I mean, Laurel prosecuted her ex-boyfriend's mom. Like, she hung out at this lady's house. But like, oh yeah, the DA doesn't see there's a problem with her, doing this, cross-examining her, a lady who probably, at one point she was probably thinking might end up her mother-in-law. Remember that back in like what, season two? I mean, what other bullshit was that? And and if you watch my video on that, I went to town on how much nonsense that was. Now, granted, the whole I'm gonna dangle you over the roof and then record your confession. Well, that's pretty much stock Batman behavior. Uh, but of course, there is just no way in hell that would be even the tiniest bit legal. So, okay, points for some realism there. But it's absolutely unfathomable that Oliver would think for 1 second that this would be something that would work. Of course, Midas was going to say, well, of course I said that. He was threatening to shove my face into a barrel full of acid. I'd have said I'd killed Jesus if he wanted me to. God. But okay, by the end of the episode, it's all good. The team can operate more or less as they traditionally have, except that they have the blessing of the powers that be. Cool. I mean, still feels very hand-wavy, but it's a degree of hand-waviness I can live with. Now, moving on to some of the more positive stuff in this episode. Definitely some very nice character moments. John's genuine joy at finding out about Felicity and Oliver having a kid. Him even having that little moment with Felicity where he gives her those gingers chew things and just says, like, look, these are what helped my wife get through pregnancy. I mean, this is great. This is what friends do in situations like this. And, he was right to kind of point out that Oliver was giving up on this whole thing way too quickly. And I kind of like that John kind of does, like he has traditionally in the past, come in there and sort of given Oliver that slap to the head. It's like, look, man, you need to think this out through. I mean, Dig's role is, in a lot of ways, to kind of be that big brother to Oliver. And that's something we haven't really seen a lot of in a long time, even though it was actually quite prominent in the earlier seasons. And what I thought was really one of the strongest parts of their relationship is that, while Dig himself was far from perfect, he's a guy who has been through a lot of stuff similar to Oliver, and he had that sort of older, more experienced wisdom that he could kind of step in and give Oliver, and then Oliver kind of carried that along and tried doing the same thing with Roy. I mean, it was a nice dynamic. And I'm glad that hasn't been forgotten. Also really kind of like Renee being the one that kind of gets it out of Dinah about what's going on with her injury, and him having that kind of close relationship with her, that he's the one who kind of calls her on her BS, but is also the sympathetic ear when she needs one. I mean, it's a similar dynamic to Oliver and Diggle in a way, but of course those two are very polar opposites in many ways, but are also, equals in terms of, more equal in terms of place and age and where they come from and all of that. Let's see here. And it was also nice seeing Dinah kind of let the team know what was going on with her injury, and her kind of getting to be the one, helping to take Midas down properly. Sort of showing that yes, I can be the police chief, I can be the captain, and I can be the Black Canary. And that speech that Renee gave her about Zoe, again, that kind of connects to the future events, and it connects nicely to their current relationship and how they play off of each other. And of course, sort of also makes what happens to their relationship in the future all the more tragic. I mean, these are two people who were once really, really close friends who really leaned on each other in the tough times. And in the future, that's gone seriously down the drain. Let's see. The whole thing, I do like what they did with Bronze Tiger, kind of really giving him that moment where he points out, like, hey, I made a deal with Oliver Queen, and he hasn't come through on that yet. And Laurel does make the reasonable point, like, yeah, this sort of thing does take time. But ultimately, it leads to him having that very endearing moment with his son that shows that, there is still good and tenderness within this man. This very brutal and hard man, but there is still good in him, which again is nice. It sort of shows us that people like this are not monsters. There is, as usual, a mix of good and evil. I mean, Ra's al Ghul did that really well. Malcolm Merlyn, I mean, his one redeeming feature was that he genuinely loved Thea. And honestly, I kind of wish we would see a little bit more of that in some of the CW villains. I kind of miss the days, like, especially in the early scenes, where even Reverse Flash had a little bit of that. He hated Barry, but he also cared about Barry. He was absolutely willing to kill anyone that got in his way, but he genuinely did care and like, Cisco and Hartley and Caitlin. And while I love Reverse Flash, they've really gotten away from him having these sort of little human elements to him that sort of showed that there was just more to him than just being this utterly selfish sociopath. But yeah. So, nice character moments, but the storytelling and a lot of the plot points in this episode are just honestly very weak. And frankly, I feel slightly insulted, especially with the whole acid thing, that the show even tried to get away with this. But what's done is done. Anyway, guys, I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, subscribe. And also join me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.